From the cracked boombox speakers on Grandpa's old skiff to dockside jam boxes and the ultra-high fidelity sound systems of today's luxury yachts. However you listen to your favorite shows, this is the Stomping Grounds podcast by Boat Trader. No matter where you are, locked on land or cruising topside, we're bringing you stories from real boaters all across America who show us why they love their boat and what makes it the perfect vessel for their neck of the woods.
Hello, I'm your host, Ryan McVinney, and welcome to Boat Trader's Stomping Grounds podcast. This is the sister podcast to our popular video series about boating culture across America. Each podcast episode delves a bit deeper into a topic from the original video episode and features an in-depth interview with an expert in the field. You can find a link to today's matching video episode in the YouTube description or podcast show notes. And if you're listening via podcast, just know that you can always check out the video version of today's episode on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/boattrader. I'm excited to share my conversation with my good friend Shawn, a remarkable underwater archaeologist and a truly unique dude. We talk about his recent work that's helped redefine the modern world's understanding of our earliest cultures and civilizations, and the boats that he uses to support his expeditions, plus much, much more. So let's sit down with him and catch up. All right, hey people, we're here with Shawn, submerged pre-contact archaeologist. Shawn, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. Good to be here, man.
Cool, man. Yeah, good to see you again. Shawn and I have had a bunch of fun banging around, screwing around on used boats, repairing them, working on them, and learning about your work over there doing submerged archaeology. So I think it would be a really interesting conversation. Can you tell people, just describe your job a little bit? I think maybe not everybody understands or knows what a submerged pre-contact archaeologist does.
During the last glacial maximum, during the last ice age, which was like 20,000 years ago, sea levels were 426 feet lower than they are today. So that opened up this huge landscape for folks to live on. So what I do is I look for, these submerged Native American sites that are offshore to help understand how, folks got here and how folks lived on the coast. And, in the process, help protect some of these sites from, offshore wind development or sand mining.
Can you share why you're passionate about doing this work, this submerged pre-contact archaeology?
Yeah. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've always been, I wanted to look for answers and explore. And the water was always, a thing that I just absolutely loved. You go to the doctor's office and you're getting your blood pressure taken and it's high and they tell you to calm down. Where I go in my head is the bottom of a deep, dark river. That's peace for me. And so, one of the bigger archaeological questions that we have is, who were the first people to get here and how did they get here? And so there's just so many questions that we have about submerged pre-contacts specifically, that, the fact that we haven't found one, coastal Paleo-Indian site on the East Coast or in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's such a high bar to just go find the first one, man. It drives me, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where, who else is looking for it? I want to go find one, man.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until about, 2 decades ago, we had a model that was called Clovis First. And we believe that, this Clovis culture was the first folks that crossed over the Bering land bridge around 13,000 years ago. And they were the first, Americans. But over the last, like I said, 2 decades, we've started to find sites that were older than 13,000 and, stone tools that did not match up with, Clovis technology. We've also done a lot of core analysis up in Canada and realized that the ice-free corridor wasn't open and viable for folks to actually, migrate down it until 12,500 years ago. So that model of, people walking over Bering land bridge coming down the ice-free corridor. It's not at this point right now. I think there's barely anybody that's still hanging on to that paradigm, but there are folks that are very invested in it and will, scratch and crawl their way, like to keep that paradigm going. But it's almost every year we find a site that's older, and they're all over the place. They're in Florida. They're in South America, where they're predating, this Clovis culture.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty fascinating. I remember learning it, in public school as a kid that was how people got here, was across the land bridge. So this is pretty groundbreaking, right?
Yeah. And so now we're completely rewriting the history books every single year. So stay tuned.
And like you say, so that was 13,000 years ago. You're saying these are older. What is like the oldest site you've found, or around how old are they?
So the oldest site that I've personally worked on is Page Ladson, and that's a really fascinating site. It's at the bottom of the Aucilla River in Florida, just south of Tallahassee, and we were digging these test units at the bottom of the river, literally through 3 feet worth of Macedon shit. And it was perfectly preserved. I mean, wow. You could see where, they were eating pieces of cypress branches, and they were perfectly cut to like the size, of their jaw.
Wow.
Grape seeds. We see like gourd seeds, and, all of a sudden we start finding these stone tools, and, it was just phenomenal. It was unbelievable. When we want to take a site and we want to prove that, hey, this is a really old, secure site, we can believe in it. You want unequivocal artifacts. So it's artifacts that there's no doubt in our mind that humans made these artifacts. You want secure context. So you want to make sure that, there wasn't a whole bunch of mixing of the dirt. And then you want solid dates. And so we ended up spending something like $250,000 in just radiocarbon dates to prove that this was in context. They just found this past year footprints in White Sands, New Mexico, and they dated to 21,000. So, of course, like whenever you have something that's super old like that, there's always going to be controversy about it. There's always going to be, you're going to have to go back. It's never going to be that Hail Mary where everybody's just like perfectly happy about your research. You just got to cover your bases, and, you got to spend a lot of money to prove to folks that this is a legitimate site, and change the history books.
What kind of boats are you using to go out and do this?
So we just picked up a 18-foot Hydrasport, which has been like so much fun to like.
Nice.
It was one of those boats that you could tell we bought it. The advertisement went out, and it was like just a barn burner boat. It's been sitting around forever. Couldn't get it running.
Yeah.
And the price that they had offered was like so low that literally there were 13 people like waiting to look at the boat that day. Yeah. And we just happened to be the first ones there, and we tinkered around with it. We got it started.
Nice.
Got it for a sweet, sweet price, and literally put like $100-$200 into it. And
nice.
It's mint now.
Nice.
So we've been using that. We've been using that a lot because it's such a small boat, and it's such an easy thing to tow, and we could put it in anywhere. Versus the sailboat, which the Winga Queen, it's 32 foot. Its draft is 5 feet, so it kind of limits us and when we can actually leave and where we can actually go.
Yeah.
And then we have a 32-foot, 2004 32-foot Donzi that we just bought.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, dual diesel motors. So like that's really going to help us with a lot of the grant money that we have. It's just like cutting the cost of fuel.
Yeah.
That is in the shop right now, just kind of getting its tune up, and hopefully that'll be hitting the water here soon.
Okay, cool. How big is the Donzi?
32 foot.
30. Oh, it's the same as the sailboat.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's insane. Like the size and the layout of the Motorcruiser versus the Donzi is just like, holy shit.
Yeah. So, and your HYDRASPort, what year is the HYDRASPort?
It's 1994.
Okay, and that's a little shorter, right? It's like 20,
18 foot.
18.
Yep, 18 foot.
That's kind of like you're banging around, get out there quick.
Yeah. It's so, like I said, man, it's so easy to just like put that in anywhere, just tow it around. You know, it's definitely a more relaxing boat for me versus like, the sailboat where we're like, you got to constantly be looking at the tides. Like, oh my God, we're not going to make it in tonight.
Right.
We're going to have to just like anchor offshore and live out here tonight.
Have you had to do that before?
Oh yeah. We'll usually take the dinghy into the beach and chill out there, go run back and forth if we need beer or whatnot.
Yeah.
But our ports, our marinas that are in the Apalachee Bay region, the tides kind of play a big role in when you can leave and when you can't.
Yeah, it's pretty shallow cuts to get in and out, right?
Right.
I know people should know also that like Shawn and I think it seems that we both share the passion for buying used junker boats,
right,
and fixing them up. So,
dude, I have so much fun doing it. It's great. Like I know a lot of people that get frustrated in it, but there's nothing better than like taking something that doesn't work or runs like a piece of shit and then turning it around and making it go. Yeah, and like figuring out what's wrong, just start going down the list, switch this out, switch that out.
Yeah. So, it's very empowering and satisfying when you get,
it certainly is.
It can be frustrating when you don't get there some days. But.
And you're just like, what is it?
Well, actually, I mean, and Shawn and I just started another little video series for Boat Trader besides Stomping Grounds, which is called Backyard Boaters. And last month we were having fun messing around with an old whaler that's pretty beat up and the motor hadn't run in years, but we got it running. So
in a day, which is phenomenal, man.
Last we touched base, you were about to follow the St. Mark's, like out off the coast of Florida. And this is when we were there. For those that haven't seen the full episode of our Stomping Ground series, it's all about exploring boat culture across America. We were going up and down the St. Mark's on a little deck boat, learning about that. But can you tell me like a little bit about that project and if you guys found anything cool?
Yeah, so I ended up following the St. Mark's out just with some side scan sonar to kind of look for, landscape features that would have been kind of useful for, Native Americans back when it was dry land. Mm-hmm. But we got 2 grants to work in between the St. Mark's River and the Aucilla River. And we've developed as a kind of a group research cohort between the Europeans and some of the folks in Florida, that we've developed a way to detect submerged pre-contact sites using a sub-bottom profiler, which basically pings out low frequency sounds to look below the bottom of the ocean. And what we figured out is a lot of the artifacts that are naturally made when folks are making stone tools, we call them flakes, they're perfectly shaped to resonate at the same frequencies that the sub-bottom profiler emits. And so with resonance, like everything has a natural resonancy. I'm sure you've like heard or seen the singer that sings at the glass and it starts to vibrate and breaks. So we're talking about that same process happening, but with the artifacts. And so the artifacts are vibrating and the sub-bottom profiler is picking it up. And so we've been kind of just doing lines back and forth between the St. Mark's and the Aucilla River. And so far, when they were finding those submerged pre-contact sites in Apalachee Bay, which is where we're working, it was years that it took them to find 20 sites. And, Morgan Smith and I went out and found 20 sites in like 3 days.
Wow.
And our success rate is somewhere up to like 86%. Every time we go and dive a target, there's a submerged pre-contact site at it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a technology that, we got to keep pushing it and we got to see where the limitations are. but it's something that'll fundamentally change the way that we do archaeology in the future.
Yeah, man. Congrats on finding all the sites.
Yeah,
That's
man.
super really cool.
Fun.
Sub-bottom profiler sounds fancy.
Yeah.
It's funny. That was my nickname in high school, actually.
Yeah. I love it.
You know, Gabe had actually brought up the point, what are the signatures that you use for finding archaeological remains? I think you kind of just talked about that, but that's not a world I know a lot about. Is there anything else to say on that?
So, you know, the model that we use now is called the Danish model. And what that the Danish were, of course, the ones that came up with it. But basically they took cultural history. So they looked at where folks would camp out, or, you know, how they would use the landscape for either fishing or camping or, you know, freshwater resources. And they took the sea level curve to see where the coastline was throughout history. And then they would hone in on those landscapes where there should be preservation. And so they were using this model up in the North Sea, and they had pretty good success in finding a lot of Stone Age sites up in the North Sea. So that's kind of the model that we use here in the U.S. whenever we're doing, you know, federal jobs or state jobs. Have, you know, state agencies have also picked up, you know, these models. But the problem with that is it highlights these areas where, you know, the high probability areas where folks may have lived, but it excludes anything outside of like river channels. And, you know, folks didn't just live in these paleo channels. They lived all over the place. And, you know, some of the sites that we were working in Apalachee Bay are nowhere near a river. Right. And they have such great, you know, they're deflated sites. So basically it was an intact site. When the water levels of the sea rose enough, it washed out just the dirt, but left the artifacts in place. And so they settled down to the bottom where they're at, you know, to this day. And, you know, we're finding these specific spots where you could see someone broke off a big rock from, you know, the bedrock and brought it about 20 meters south and started making stone tools out of it. And it's just this, you know, compact little spot. And who knows, it might have been a cool tree stump that, you know, somebody was sitting on. But a lot of the chipping debris from making those stone tools fit back together, and they're side by side, and they've been submerged for, you know, probably 5,000 years. So they've gone through 5,000 years worth of hurricanes, but they're still, you know, relatively intact.
Wow.
And so, yeah, these sites never would have been found using, you know, the Danish model that we use, you know, today. So hopefully so that method with using the sub-bottom profiler is called the HALD method. Mm-hmm. It's Human-Altered Lithic Detection system. Okay. And so hopefully, you know, if we can start working in the HALD method and using the Danish model, you know, to start locating more sites, you know, it gives us a better opportunity. You know, it's a big ocean out there, man. Yeah. And trying to find these locations is extremely difficult and extremely costly. Yeah. But if we can narrow it down to, you know, specific areas that we can concentrate on, like I said, it'll just fundamentally change the way that we do archaeology.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if like listeners are getting how, like, I think that's so cool that the coast was, like, how far away do we think the actual coast was from where it is now? So
it really depends on where you are in the U.S. So when you're in Florida,
like, yeah, along the Forgotten Coast kind of area.
Oh yeah, like the coastline was, you know, 150, almost 200 miles south of where it is today. If you go out to California, though, where the topography, the offshore bathymetry is really steep, so it didn't really move all that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you go along the Atlantic coast, you know, that distance changes, but, you know, it's anywhere on average to 60 miles from, you know, where it is today. Yeah. So it's such a huge area to, you know, investigate. And, you know, you take folks usually had a range in which they could walk in a specific day. And it's usually about 10 kilometers. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about these Paleo-Indians that are living on the coast, they weren't walking to the modern coastline that we have on the East Coast. So really, we have no idea about these folks. We have no idea like how they lived, how they used the coast, what kind of tools they used. Nothing. We've not one site. Yeah. So doing the work offshore is just such a great opportunity to fill in these huge gaps in human history.
Do you guys ever deal with like submersibles, like submarines or anything?
So the company that I work for, the private company Search, we partner up with Ocean Infinity, and they have like some of the world's most incredible automated vessels and AUVs.
Cool.
And yeah, that's going to be the future of a lot of this offshore survey. Is just you throw, some of these boats are 70 meters long. They're gigantic, and they're automated. People are, steering and collecting data from onshore.
Wow.
So that gives us a huge cut in emissions because they're electric.
Right.
A huge cut in pay for, having to have, merchant marines on the boat, running the boat. In addition to the scientists, now the scientists can just sit in their living room, and watch the data stream in. And it also gives us a super awesome opportunity to share, some of these data with students and kind of get them excited and inspired to enter into the marine, the marine world and doing a lot of this research.
Wow, that's cool. And by the way, where could people learn more about this if they want? I mean, in addition to watching our Stomping Grounds episode where we have you talk about it, but where else can they go to learn more if they want?
So we have a nonprofit that we have set up. It's called the Archaeological Co-op, and you can find that online at artcoop.org. We can put it up on the screen for you here. It's right here. And the private firm that I work for, Search, so search.com. Okay. There's a bunch of, folks there that do everything, involved in archaeology. I think we have something like 44 sectors, special sectors that people, specialize in. And, submerged pre-contact is one of them. And I lead that sector. So, yeah.
Shawn, Joy, it's been a joy. Thanks for talking to us.
You, Ryan. And I'm looking forward to the next time you're down in Florida. We can tinker around with boats and drink some beers.
Oh man, I can't wait. I'm already planning my next trip. So
awesome, man. Awesome. Hell yeah, dude.
Cool, man. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right. See you, dude.
All right, cheers.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening to the Stomping Grounds podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider following or favoriting the show. Please tune in to the next episode. And for now, we'll see you out there on the water. Stay floating, America.